Everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm just going to share my screen and then I can start to show you through. Okay, right. So I'm going to start from scratch with iDocs system because some of you may well be familiar with using it already. And but obviously some of you it'll be completely new to as well. So I'll start to go through, but hopefully even the ones that are using it on a regular basis, there'll be some useful information there for you to kind of fine tune how you're using the system as it is now. So we're very lucky in Dorset in that BCP Council and Dorset Council both fund separate versions of iDocs. So they will fund you if you have a turnover under 1 million, if you're a small to medium-sized charitable organisation or a small enterprise. So we're very lucky that is funded centrally. Some areas don't have that facility and individual charitable organisations do have to have their own subscriptions. So bearing that in mind, once you register for iDocs, once a year you will receive an annual survey asking you about your use of the system and whether you've had any success through it. So I would really encourage you to respond to that survey because obviously in the times we're in where councils are having to make very tough decisions about funding commitments, it's important for them to be able to demonstrate the use that iDocs is to local organisations. So if you do use it, you apply for funding and then you do successfully receive funds through it, then please do keep a record of that and share that as part of that survey. And also if you welcome to share that with me as well, because it's very helpful for us to be able to demonstrate how this system actually is supporting local groups. So that gives us that kind of actual factual evidence for that. So just to flag that at this stage. So this is the main homepage for the BCP version of iDocs. The Dorset Council version is very similar, but you'll just have their own Dorset Council logo at the top here. But other than that, they're pretty much identical. So I'll start you off in the login register section for those of you who haven't completed this yet, just to look at it quickly. It's pretty straightforward. So all you really need to do is add in your own details. I'm just going to scroll down. Your organisation details, postcode, add yourself a password and confirm your password. Down to the bottom section here, it's helpful if you can tick these two boxes. These are the ones that allow the council to then follow up with you to find out about, the annual survey. But also the second box here is very helpful one to tick. As we come on to the search information, I'll show you there where this comes into play. But you will receive regular news updates from iDocs about current funds, new funds, updates to programs. So if you make sure that you tick this box when you register, that's a really useful ongoing source of information. And again, linked to that as part of the terms and conditions, you need to just tick to say that you are an eligible organisation, that you have a turnover under 1 million. And then the user agreement down the bottom here, just that you consent that BCP iDocs Open4Community can use your data for the above purposes. So once you've completed all that information, you can go ahead and register. I'll log in as myself so that then I can take you through the rest of the system. So if you're new to it, help and advice tab here, there's a PDF user guide that you can download, which will talk you through how the whole thing is set up and give you some useful pointers. That's something that you can go back to as and when you need to. But it is quite an intuitive program. It's quite easy to use. And once you've started to find your way through it, I'm sure there won't be any issues. There are some helpful information leaflets in this section. So things like government funding, lottery funding, trust funding, social enterprises, and something about community jargon. And along here as well, there are different information sheets and pointers to help, such as like what a fund is looking for, And they're quite useful little snippets of information here that you can look into to help guide your fundraising. So I'd encourage you to have a look through them in your own time, just to kind of help support all of your work. So going into the main sections now from the home page, I'll show you through the news section first, because this is a very useful source of current information. Local news, some areas do fund a separate local news section where they'll kind of pull out if there's any local funding schemes, but that's not available in this area. But all of the funds that are available locally are within iDocs, so it is all in there. So if you go into the news section, you'll see here there's regular news updates and about different funding schemes that have been launched, different new rounds that are open, calls for applications and new funds, and updates to all of the main funds that are held within the system as a whole. So this is a really useful place to come to. And when you receive the newsletters through iDocs, you'll get a summary of these news updates that come through on an email to you directly. Once you receive those emails, you can click on the link, which will then bring you back onto this system, and you can go directly to find out the fund information. So I just click on this top one just to show you how it works, but basically it'll take you through to a summary page where you can find out a little bit more about that news article, about the fund, any deadlines and that kind of thing there. So in the related funds section here, once you click on this link, it will take you to the actual page for that program or that funder. And then I'll just show you this quickly, but I will go through one of these in more detail when we actually look at a funding search. So all of the information linked to that news article for that fund can then be found. If you want to go back to the news section, you can just go back this way, or otherwise just click on the back button. So you can scroll back through all the different days of the funding bulletins. And as you can see, there's a lot of information on here. They have a whole team of people that work behind the scenes on iDocs that keep this information up to date. And it is a very up-to-date system, actually, iDocs. Some of the other funding search engines don't tend to stay as well up to date as this one, I would say. So the vast majority of the information is very current and very up to date through this system.
Can I just ask a question on that?
Yeah, sure.
So those dates that are highlighted there, they're the dates the funding came out or was published. Is there like so you have to go into each one to find out when the closing date is for that, do you? You
do, yes. If it's part of this system, you do. I will show you shortly, there is a way of sorting the searches so that they're in date order.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. But these are the actual dates here are when the news article was published. So if you want to look for that level of detail beyond it, then you just click on that link.
Lovely, thank you.
Okay, so I'll show you through the browse funding section first of all. So the same information is held, and you can find whether you go through the search funding tab or the browse funding tab. But the browse funding is already sorted into the type of organisation that's eligible to apply. So it depends on your preference how you like to look up the different information. But for instance, if you're a community interest company, there tend to be more limited funding options for them. So this might be a helpful way for you to be able to initially filter your searches before you go into the main search. So I'll just show you through that one as an example. Basically, you just click on community interest. You then click on filter results further. You will then come up with a whole list of different sections of work. So arts and culture, children and young people, community development. So depending on where your area of work lies, you can select into these different sections. So you'll then be given an option to filter your results further. And then this again drills it down again. So I'll just show you through. Once you get to this stage, you can view all category results, and it will come up with all of the different funds that you would potentially be eligible to apply for. And it will sort it into regional, national, so that if there's local ones, that they'll be highlighted at this stage. I say potentially eligible for because, I mean, I'm sure those of you that are already familiar with the system or have used it before, sometimes it does throw in ones that are generally open, but actually they're not. So is you do become familiar with that at the time. So for instance, Big Local is a very specific lottery funded program that only funds certain areas and certain pieces of work. But because in theory it's an open program for the whole country, it will always show up in pretty much every search engine. But generally, it's not one that's eligible to be applied to nationally, or, you know, it tends to focus on very particular town or ward areas. So there's a couple of those thrown in, but there aren't too many. So, you know, you learn to spot them quite quickly. But so the research, if you go in through this section of the searches, it is helpful that it does automatically search it into local, then regional first. Because often with smaller local organisations, you do stand a stronger chance of securing funding through local funders initially, especially if you're a newer organisation and you're tackling particular local issues. So, for instance, as I mentioned, Big Lottery, but you've got Dorset Community Foundation there, and the different funds that they have open at the moment, and there'll be some other local funds that you can apply to. Okay, so that's, once you want to, all of the filter sections here and the sorting results, I'll show you at the next stage, because they're identical, but it's just there's two different ways of how you can sort the information. So that's the browse funding side of things. So whether you're one of these other organizations, that's quite a helpful way to be able for you to just be able to narrow down your search results initially. Okay, so I'll take you through the more detailed search area now. You'll find there's a lot more funding options that you have to select this way. So I'll just kind of talk you through and just do a basic search at this stage, just so that you can see how it actually works if you haven't been on here already. So it'll ask you what your organisation type is. So I'll tick charitable trust and foundation. It'll ask you what your area of work is. It can go quite detailed at this stage. What it's important to bear in mind with is IDOCS. There are several thousand funders that are held on this system. So the more boxes you tick, the more results you will get. So it's helpful if you can be as focused as you can be, so that whilst it's great to have lots of search results, they're not always ones that are going to be appropriate for you. And it's going to obviously take you a lot of time to drill down to get to that level of detail before you realise that. So the more you can select your area of work at this stage and keep your searches focused, the more efficient it is for your time. So once you get into these different sections, you can click on the little arrows at the side here, and you'll be given different sets of options that you can tick as well. So I'll tick the general community one for this stage. You also have things like specialisms with disability work, education and training, environment. And as you can see, there's a lot of detail in here, and pretty much will cover the vast majority of the work that most organisations do. So I'll just tick those 2 boxes for now. I mean, they are quite wide, but there is also the facility to search a phrase. And this can be very helpful. When I did my initial training with iDocs, the guy used as an example that there was a small enterprise that wanted to do some work, bringing in some grazing, rewilding some grazing land, and which is obviously very, very specific work. And if you key in the word grazing or rewilding, those kind of words will then get flagged through your search. But obviously, if you're going to flag a word like community, which is much broader, you're going to get a lot more results from that. So, but if there is a very particular piece of work you're doing and a particular word that sums that up, then that can be a very helpful thing for you to look at as well. So once you get to the stage of selecting your different areas of work, you just click OK. It will ask you about your project, whether it's, again, there's lots of different options here: arts, culture, heritage, children and young people, community development. So whichever is appropriate for you. I'm going to tick the health and social one at this stage because that's an appropriate one for a lot of local organisations. Again, you just click OK. You can uncheck any of those if they're not relevant for you, obviously. And then it will ask you what costs you want to cover. So this can be things like business planning and development, paying staff, paying utility bills, those kind of core costs. Or you can tick to say about buildings, which tend to be capital funds, purchasing equipment, that kind of thing. So I'm going to tick paying staff for the core cost element. Again, this is where you can put in a particular word that if that's helpful to you. So you can alter your different search options here, whether you want to search for all text by fund name, match, word match. So I tend to just kind of keep them as open as I can. So once you're ready with all of those, you just click on the search now. And so this has come up with 47 results. And you can see again, it's sorted into local, regional and national funds. So as I said, the wider you put your selection criteria, the more search results you're likely to get. And you can drill those right down as well. So sometimes you might just get 2 or 3 search results come up. So what you can do then, as I showed you before, you click onto the individual funder. You can see just an overview, whether it's open for applications, the maximum you can apply for, objectives of the funds. This is helpful information here, the value notes, because often it might say that you can apply for a maximum value of 50,000 when actually the vast majority of the grants that the funder gives out might be 2,000 to 3,000. So this gives you a bit more detail there to go on. So, and that can help you use your time effectively when approaching different funders. It'll give you an overview of who can apply and if there are any other eligibility criteria you need to meet. It'll also highlight if there's any funding restrictions. So these vary from different funder. Some, as this one's highlighted here, some won't fund local branches of national organisations, but some funders will. The vast majority of funders won't fund retrospectively, so that'll probably be in most of the ones that you come across. And then it also gives you some guidance about what kind of funders, what kind of other exclusions there might be. So eligible expenditure will give you an overview here, as well as how to apply. If the fund does have a website, it will give you a link here. And so you can just click on there and it'll take you directly to the funder. Some of the small charitable trusts don't have their own website. So in that case, what will happen is up over this section here, it will show you where the contact information is. So if a funder doesn't have a website, it'll say something like apply in writing to, and then you've got that detail there. Okay, so I'll go back. So that's just one of the search results there. What you can do over in this section is if you click on these, you can filter your results through different options. So you can filter it through government, lottery, charitable trusts, or corporate foundations if you wanted to do that. Again, here you can filter by funding type, grants, loans, other detail. I mean, I think the vast majority of local fundraising is grants, and the vast majority of funding search results will be grants as well. You can filter by geographical scope, but it is already done in that way through the system. So this is a helpful one, filtering by status, because it will include funds like this one here, actually, the 7 Stars Foundation. So this one is actually closed to applications at the moment, but is going to reopen in August. So if you're looking for funds that you want to apply to immediately, it's worth you selecting the open for applications option, and then it will just give you the ones that you can apply to now. But if you want to kind of get an overview of what's coming up over the next 6 months to a year, then you can keep that open, and then you can see you've got a broader overview of what's coming up, and you can build those into your fundraising strategy. Okay, so going down to this section, you can sort your results alphabetically, and you can also sort them through the deadline. So it will then come up which ones, it reorders them by date. So that can be a helpful thing for you to build in. You can also sort your results through the funding provider, funding type, geographic scope, which is what it was before. Maximum value is a helpful one. As I mentioned before, and you can see on the screen here, some funds like this one here, maximum value of €50,000, whereas the maximum value of this one is €7,000. So if you're, for instance, looking for large capital grants, then you don't necessarily want to be looking at a lot of small funders. You want to be targeting your research to some of the larger funding amounts. So that's the place where you can get to that level of information. Okay, so a useful facility that you can do is to save your different searches. On each of the pages, you'll see they all have a tick box here. So if you click on Save Search at this stage, with all of the boxes unticked, it will save all of them up to 250 entries. So, but if you want to just save selected ones, which I'll do now just to show you how that works. So if I just save these 3, you can click on Save Selected Items. You can give it a name, and then if you click on Save, it'll save those for you. I'll show you in a second where they're saved, but what you can do from that information is, let's unclick them. If you click on the ones that you're interested in, you can then click on Report. And what that will do is produce you, I can't actually show you that, it's gone above my screen. I don't know if, can you see that okay? Demo. So what it will then do is turn that information into a Word report for you and give you a summary of those different funds. It'll show you the criteria that you put in to search them, and then a summary of each of those different funds. So you can then save them to use for your own purposes and your records. So, and they're obviously quite helpful things to have, because you do tend to find that you'll often be searching the same information over and over for different pieces of work potentially, or at different times of year for your organisation. Each search that you save will be in your saved search sections. And then what you can do is just click on those. Oh, I'm saying that and it's not there now, but it should usually be in there. It might be that I didn't click the save properly. But so you can click on those different funds and all of that information will be held there. And if you've clicked the box to say, keep me updated with news, then each time one of these changes, or there's a new program or a new deadline, or something coming up that's relevant for that fund, you will receive information on that on your little news bulletin that you get from iDocs. So it is quite helpful. Okay, so that's the main detail with the searches. So it's pretty straightforward, and it's just a question of really finding your way through it. So as I said, the key things to remember is to try to keep your searches as focused as you can, because the more boxes you tick, the wider your search results will be, but they're not necessarily then going to be appropriate for the actual funding you want to secure. The amounts is a really helpful one, so that, as I said, if you're looking to raise £100,000, you don't want to be going to lots of funders that might give you £250. So that's a very good search facility to have in place, as well as the deadline. I always recommend to people to try to build some kind of fundraising strategy as far as you can. So if you need to secure funds for a project in a year's time, then you can search up your different funding options, sort them through the deadline, and then sorry, that's my work phone. I'll just switch that off because I am actually working. Yeah, so you can search through the deadlines, and then you can work them through your time frame so that you're not missing out on any deadlines. Okay, and as I said, the other key thing to remember is the email alerts. Right, so what I will quickly show you now is there's another, sorry, I should have opened this one already. There's another source of information that works really well alongside iDocs, and that's 360-degree funding. So this website holds funding on all data information on all funders that actually give out grants. Oh, it's not going to load for some reason. But
spelling.
Oh, thank you. Haven't got my glasses on. Right, 360-degree giving. So this website is open data for grant making, as it says. So you can search on here for any funder that gives out charitable grants, and you can find out how much they give out, where they've given it to, and you can sort all of that information as well. It holds grants currently on 252 funders. It's given out that have given out 891,000 grants. So there's a lot of detail there, and that can work really well alongside iDocs if you're targeting particular funds and you want to see how much they're actually giving out in the real world, what kind of work they are actually funding. Then that can be a really useful source for you to do that. It tends to be much more useful if you're looking for larger, significant grants that you want to look into that level of detail for. But obviously it's not going to be a good use of your time to look into that level of detail for small grants. But if you're looking to fund a large capital build, then, or significant pieces of work, then this is a very useful place to go to alongside iDocs. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my now and just answer if anybody.
Yeah, I'm in a meeting at the moment on Zoom. Okay, yes.
Just muted Ellie, I think, for a second, just in case. So does anyone have any questions for Louise about the search engine at all? Feel free to come on mic if necessary.
Can you restrict your searches just to the BCP area?
You can by selecting the local sources. So that will just, I mean, it will cover Dorset wide.
Yeah.
It won't just do BCP as such, because it's
fine.
not that kind of level of detail. But I mean, there are only a few funders in Dorset anyway, so you'll always get a very small number of search results coming up within there. So the other source of information that's really good actually for small local fund is the Dorset Community Foundation website. Have a link on there to small local funds, but they do tend to be very small funds, you know, sort of like a couple of £100 here and there. But if it's a small piece of local community work you're looking at, then there's a number of small charitable foundations based in Dorset that are often family-based ones that you can look into as well.
I've got a question which relates to funding and sort of trying to take advantage of the hive mind that we've got here today, which is there's a few things that I really want to crack on with doing, and where they're saying like they don't provide funding for retrospective actions. I'm just wondering, has anybody here got some tips on how to navigate that? Because it's like some stuff I see really needs to be done, and I could either try and do it on a shoestring, or I could be very restrained and leave it until I can get some funding. But I just don't know how to balance that at the moment. I don't know if that question made any sense, but I just need some help in figuring that out in my brain.
Yeah. Is it for things you're actually purchasing, or is it for pieces of work that you need the funding for?
Most often it would be pieces of work.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, funders will often fund pieces of work that are being done on a repeat basis.
Okay.
So, you know, there's ways that you can get around that. And, you know, if you're doing similar piece of work but in different places, or there's different aspects of that, then there's more flexibility around that.
Okay.
But if you're going and like buying a piece of equipment, or, you know, some kind of capital purchase, then very, very few funders will fund that if you've already paid for that. Because, you know, obviously, if you found the money to pay for it, you maybe don't need it from them. But certainly in terms of pieces of work, there's flexibility there. And it's, you know, you can always present things in a way that you've piloted a piece of work. So you've tested it out, and funders actually like to see that. They like to see that you've said, well, we worked with this organisation and we delivered this piece of work here to test it out, see what the response was. And now we want to move on and expand that piece of work and deliver it here, here, here. And, you know, so if you present things in those terms, then there's no issue there at all. And that's something funders do want to see. So it's how you frame it.
To give you a high five for that one. That is genius. Thank you very much. That helps.
I mean, if you ever want to book a one-to-one with me, Lorraine, you know, I'd be very happy to, you know, have an individual call with you, and we can talk through anything you need to for your work and your projects. So
thank you. Cheers.
no problem.
See, Ellie's got her hand up. Ellie, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah. No, it's not a question. It's just something that probably linked to what Lorraine's just said. We just achieved £1,200 from the Asda Foundation, and those are done via their community champion. So it's always well worthwhile, you know, finding the community champions for your sort of local Asdas and see what funds they've got available. From time of applying to receiving the grant was something like about 6 weeks. So, you know, that might be a useful source.
Yes, thank you, Ellie. Absolutely. And Tesco do small local funds as well, and Waitrose. So they're often worth looking into. Chris has organised several meet the funder sessions with the supermarkets as well. So look out for them, because they can be a quite useful source for you to meet that community champion and find out about those little funds.
I think Wilkinson's do something similar. Would they be included? Because I saw Poundland was on the example you gave us. Would they be included in that search engine as well, or would they be like the Tesco's and the Asda?
Yeah, they should be. Yeah, and Asda and Tesco's will come up on those search engines
Okay.
often as well if they're national things. So, but they don't tend to. If it's like an Asda community champion, that's kind of direct local fundraising for a local organisation rather than something you can apply to as such. So something like that won't flag up on there. But I think Wilco Wilco run a foundation that you can apply to, but it varies, because some corporates will they'll put out a call for entries like once a year, and they'll invite applications from charitable organisations that they'll then fund over that year period or a multiple year period. Whereas others, you can build a local relationship and they might sponsor you by providing things or getting staff to get involved in local activities. So it depends with corporates, but if they do have some kind of structured foundation that you can apply to, whether locally or regionally, then it should show up on the IDOC system.
Any more questions for Louise? And we can go a little bit off piste if Louise doesn't mind, if there is a generic funding related question. But
Yeah,
And sorry, I missed the very beginning because someone walked in. So do we just follow, I can listen back, but do we just log into BCP4Community and then register? I just missed that first nugget of information.
Yeah, Chris will send around the link to everybody
Okay.
after this session. Yeah, and then you can log straight in, and once you've set up your details and your password, you can use the system straight away. So you haven't got to be, it hasn't got to be approved by anybody, anything like that. So yeah, it's then open access.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, if anybody has any issues setting up or finding their way around initially, please do get in touch with me, and I'll, happily talk you through individually, or, give you any pointers if you're having any issues. I know when a lot of people start using it, sometimes they're sort of bombarded with 800 search results and sort of think, oh, I don't know where to start with that. But once you get more used to using it, you do get a bit more intuitive with it. But I always do encourage people, and something I do myself, is to keep your own records alongside it. So if you set up some kind of Excel spreadsheet or something where you list your different funders, and what I always do is I'll do a sort of tick box thing for keywords that they'll fund. So things like community, young people, older people, disabled people, things like that. And then you can just cross those boxes, and for your records that those are options for that funder. Then what I do is put on there, because some funders will accept applications on a quarterly basis. Some will have a deadline once a year, and some will accept them on a rolling program. So I'll make a note of how that works. And then I'll put whether it's by writing or website, online application, and then a web link. So if you've got all of that information in one place, it can save you an awful lot of time and keep going through search results. It obviously takes a bit of time to set up, but once you've done it, and if you just add a few notes each time you do it, then that can very quickly build up to quite a good body of information. And then you can flag up if there's key areas of your work that you want funded. It helps you to highlight which would be the most appropriate funder, at those early stages, as well as looking at the deadlines for people as well. So, fundraising is through grants. It's really all about research and getting that research right. But the more you look into it and the more you make sure you're meeting the funder's criteria, the better chances you have of success with that funder. So it is always useful to kind of build that bank of information for yourself, rather than be saving lots of different reports that you've then got to kind of filter through.
Thank you, Louise. I'm just going to end the recording now. We'll do that. But before